Welcome to this lesson about absolute value. Absolute value is the distance of a number from 0. The absolute value of a number is always positive because distance is always positive. For example, you can't run -5 miles. That's a distance, so it's always going to be +5 or positive whatever number. So the absolute value of 5 stays 5, but the absolute value of a negative number like -7 is just 7 because it's 7 units away from 0. So in order to solve an absolute value equation, like the one below, there are 3 steps. The first step is to isolate the absolute value expression, which would be this expression. And isolate just means get it by itself on one side without anything else being on that side of the equal sign. So the first thing we want to do is move the +4 to the other side of the equal sign. So we want to do the inverse of +4, so that would be -4 or -4. And we want to keep it balanced, so we're going to do it to both sides. Then we're going to bring the absolute value expression down. 4 minus 4 is 0. Bring our equal sign down, and then 9 minus 4 is 5. Then, once we have the absolute value expression by itself, we are going to write that equation, that expression, inside the absolute value symbols twice with positive and negative numbers. So, x plus 3 equals +5, and then x plus 3 equals -5, because both would be true. Both of those equations would be true since it's just the distance. And then you would just solve both of those expressions like a normal equation. So -3 minus 3, 3 minus 3 is 0, so x equals 2. That's one answer. And then subtract 3, 3 minus 3 is still 0, so x equals -8. And then to check, you can always substitute those back into the equation to make sure that it makes the equation true. For example, I'm just going to change the color here, so I'm just checking here. So I'm going to substitute this 2 back in for x. And then I'm going to subtract the 4 from both sides. 4 minus 4 is 0 equals 5. Then I'm going to simplify inside the absolute value symbols. So 2 plus 3 is the absolute value of 5. And that is true. The absolute value of 5 is equal to 5. And you can do the same thing with the -8. Substitute it back in. So -8 plus 3 is 9. Subtract 4 from both sides. So 5, and then simplify inside the absolute value symbols. -8 plus 3 is -5, and the absolute value of -5 is +5, and +5 equals +5. That's true. All right, so we have some examples down at the bottom. If you want to pause the video and try them by yourself, you can do that now. And let's go ahead and solve these together. So remember, the first step is to get the absolute value expression by itself on one side to isolate it. This one, we've already done that. So the absolute value expression is isolated, it's by itself. So then we move on to step 2. Step 2 is to write the equation twice with positive and negative answers without the absolute value symbols. So 2x minus 1 equals 11, 2x minus 1 equals -11. Notice I got rid of the absolute value symbols. I just wrote the equation twice, one with +11, one with -11. And then you just solve it as a simple equation from there. So add 1 to both sides. -1 plus 1 is 0. Bring down my 2x. Divide by 2 on both sides, so x equals 6. Add 1, add 1. Divide by 2, So x also equals -5. So you notice here that these usually have two answers. They won't always, and we'll get to one like that, but typically an absolute value equation will have two answers, two values that make the absolute value equation true. All right, number 2. First step is to isolate the absolute value expression. That's already been done. There's nothing on that side with the absolute value of 4x. So now we can move on to step 2, which is to write that expression twice with the equals and the positive and negative answers. And then we'll just solve, divide by 4 on both sides. 4 divided by 4 is 1, so 1x equals 16 divided by 4 is 4, so x equals 4. Same thing over here. -16 divided by 4 is -4. You could also write this x equals plus or minus 4 if you would like. Number 3, first step is to isolate the absolute value expression. We do need to do step 1 on this one because we have a -10 with the absolute value expression, so we need to isolate and move that to the other side. So we want to do the inverse by adding 10. -10 plus 10 is 0, so just bring down your equals. 3 plus 10 is 13. Now the absolute value expression is by itself, it's isolated, so then we can get rid of the absolute value symbols and write the equation twice with positive and negative answers, and then solve from there. So x equals 9 and x also equals -17. All right, and number 4, we need to isolate, so we need to add 2 to both sides so that the absolute value expression will be by itself. -2 plus 2 is 0, so I'm going to bring down the absolute value of x. 16 plus 2 is 18. Now the absolute value expression is by itself, so I can lose the absolute value symbols and write it twice with positive and negative answers, and look, we're done. X equals 18, x equals -18. All right, number 5, the absolute value of x equals -5. First step is to isolate the absolute value expression, but we don't need to do that. Now, this one is a little bit tricky because it says the absolute value of x equals -5. And let's say that you weren't really paying attention and you just followed along with your steps. So I want to write it twice with positive and negative answers, but the answer is already negative. The answer is already negative, so it would be like -5, -5, which is +5, right? But you want to always substitute back in and make sure that that makes the equation true. So let's say that we weren't really paying attention and we just were following the steps. Let's substitute that back in and make sure it's true. So the absolute value of -5 equals -5. Is that true? Well, no, the absolute value of -5 is equal to +5, because remember, the absolute value of anything is positive because it's a distance. You can't run -5 miles, so you can't have a negative answer. So in this case, that is not true. That is not true. So in this case, there is actually no solution. So that would be our answer, no solution, because there's nothing you could substitute in for x that would give you a negative answer back. Absolute values are always positive. All right, and then the last one, let's isolate our expression. And then we're going to write it twice. Multiply by 5 on both sides. 5 times 1 over 5 is 1, so 1x equals 20. And -20.